Hello, my name is Kirsten. The claim that I'll be refuting today is that the wage gap is a myth. My opponent's secondary claims were that the wage gap is a result of poor statistical analysis, that disparities in pay are not the result of sexual discrimination, and that the differences in earnings are the result of personal choices. And I'm going to be responding to each of these supporting claims and saying that they're a fallacy in some way. So the first claim is that the wage gap is a result of poor statistical analysis. So my opponent stated that the wage gap is defined as women earning only about 76% as much as men for the exact same work. And he said that this statistic was found by comparing average earnings of all women in the U.S. to the average earnings of all men in the U.S., and that it didn't account for other factors such as education, occupation, position, job experience, and hours worked. However, there are actually studies that do include these factors. According to a report done by the U.S. General Accounting Office, even after accounting for factors that affect earnings such as work patterns, industry, and occupation, women earned an average of 80% of what men earned. So there is a difference, but there is still a wage gap there. In another study done by Dr. Catherine Hill, who is the Vice President for Research at the American Association of University Women, she did a study about how education and job experience affect earnings for men and women, and she collected data from women and men's earnings 1 year after graduating college. They were compared women and men with the same degree. So they had the same degree, so the same level of education, and also had the same amount of work experience. So that was controlled for. So even with the same education and job experience, she found that women still earned about 82% of men's earnings. So there are studies that include those factors. So for my opponent's secondary claim, he said that disparities in pay are not the result of sexual discrimination. Well, I'd like to respond to that by saying that even though it's a law, it still happens. Cornell economists Francine D. Blau and Lawrence M. Kahn, they tried to quantify what percentage of the pay gap between men and women were due to aspects that couldn't be easily measured, and they got the number of 41%, but they said that this includes like occupation, educational attainment, and years of experience, things that they couldn't easily measure in a wage gap, and they said that at least some of this is due to discrimination, even if it is subtle and subconscious. So you can't say that there's no wage gap because there's no sexual discrimination, when in fact there are, whether it is subconscious or not. For the third claim, he said that the differences in earnings are the result of personal choices. One of the evidences that the opponent stated was that men and women do not do the exact same work. I think that this point is a little bit irrelevant because he was comparing, he defined the wage gap as a difference in earnings for the same exact work. So you can't argue the fact that they don't work the same things when you're arguing for a definition in which men and women do the exact same work. He also, he also stated that it's not a result of personal choices, but for women, sometimes it's not always a personal choice. They don't want to leave the workforce to care for children. Sometimes they're a single mother and they're forced to do it. According to Price Covert, from an article on Think Progress, she said that Our country is also unique in making it difficult for both parents to remain in the workforce, and that burden disproportionately falls to women, a good number of whom may not want to leave their jobs. So, yeah, it's a stigma that society puts on women that they should be the ones to leave the workforce to care for children. And lastly, my opponent stated that women are less likely to negotiate salaries than men. Well, according to a study done by Linda Babcock, who is a professor of economics at Carnegie Mellon University, it was found that male employers are less likely to hire a woman who negotiates about salary because the men perceive these women as demanding. So women are discouraged from asking for a raise because they want to avoid such discrimination, and it's by no fault of the women, but by the fault of our current culture. So thank you for your time.
All right, structurally stuff is really solid. On the first point, you kind of make this argument about, that it's all jobs or all categories, and that there are problems with that. And then you've got counter studies that talk about that. I like the fact that you had a couple of counter studies that try to account for the issues that the advocate was talking about in their particular criticism. I'm not sure that all of the issues were involved. I don't remember exactly what the advocate's argument was, but I thought you did a very good job of certainly minimizing the importance of those differences and suggesting that when they are controlled for, there is still a substantial difference that exists, and you quantify it, and it is a little bit different from the 76%, but it still seems to me to be substantial. On the second point, on the issue of sex discrimination, the information that you have is a little ambiguous. It says, controlling for all these factors, at least some of this is due to discrimination. Okay, well, I'm not sure that the advocate ever denied that such discrimination might exist, but he's suggesting that it's largely a factor of those other issues. Since you can't quantify it and he doesn't try to quantify it, I'm not sure that that gets you very much for either person on that particular point. And then on the third point, where you talk about the personal choices that people are making, I didn't quite understand the criticism that you were making of his definition and how that seems to undermine the argument that he's making, that he's kind of contradicting himself. I didn't get that. The second argument that says that women are the ones that they don't choose so much, but they're forced to do this, and that's a cultural issue. I think there might be a legitimate argument here about how culture expects women to give up working outside of the home in order to take care of children and that sort of thing. That's a legitimate criticism. However, I'm not sure that undermines the argument that the advocate's making, which says that it's due to factors like that. That's a cultural factor. Maybe the argument should be that the cultural factors ought to be included in this evaluation, and then maybe the focus of the argument would change a little bit. But I thought that you did an excellent job finding counter evidence on the individual points. I think you could do a little bit more talking about the reasoning of the advocate's point. The one place where you did that, it was, like I said, just a little bit confusing. All right, thank you.